Hello? Beautiful.
It's unmuted now.
Yeah, you were echoey. How?
Yeah.
That's because of my count. My
Yeah, you're.
sounds good.
Have fun.
and some of the measures and targets will come from that one. And then the rest is going to come from resilient infrastructure strategy.
Yeah, no, I saw that. Yeah.
We're working on introducing measures more into our practice, right? To just like anything
and then
happen overnight, right?
And that kind of question, because I mean, like when Wes said that, that would be the only thing that I would question. I mean, because I think performance measures are more at the corporate planning level. I mean, you can have targets and all that stuff, but that's you're down into the weeds. And in my opinion, that's my history of it.
Yeah, and maybe there are indicators, but council is typically interested in seeing, are we making a difference in certain areas, right?
Yeah, but you get those in the quarterly updates,
Yeah.
whether you're red, blue.
Yeah.
Oh, even the 2 Dianes aren't coming in. Oh, well, now.
Okay, so we should.
Anne's at home.
Move to order, or do we want to wait for the mayor? A few more minutes.
Let the mayor say she was late. She's coming in late.
I did not hear anything about the mayor coming in. See, I thought, according to my information, just from.
She was coming in late, but I don't know what that means, how late.
I guess you can start, Renee. It's past 10, so.
Okay, I'm just going to be the acting chair because we are going to do the election off the hop here with the agenda. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so we have McDonald and we have Martin as members of our committee that are public members. And do we have any nominations for the position of the chair?
I nominate McDonald. He's done a very good job in the past term.
Nominations, and you can nominate yourself.
And I'm nominating McDonald.
Yes.
Yeah. We got that. She.
Okay, I didn't know because nobody said anything.
Oh, sorry.
And Kathy just texted me and said I'll be a few minutes joining the IAC meeting. Just FYI.
Okay, as I hear no other nominations for chair, McDonald, do you accept the nomination?
I do, thank you. And thank you for Councillor Hughes.
As there are no further nominations, I declare the nominations closed and McDonald nominated as chair of the Internal Audit Steering Committee for 2022. And I'm going to pass it over to you, McDonald, to do the election of the vice chair.
Thank you very much. And welcome everybody to the Internal Audit Steering Committee meeting for May 24th. I think I'll call the meeting to order. And with that, we'll request a motion to adopt, the agenda as presented.
I can do that. Sorry, McDonald. It's Ken Mackay.
Thank you.
Did you want to
Councillor.
We need vice chair.
Yeah, McDonald, Renee just pointed out to me, because I'm sitting in the room, we need the vice chair as well. So if you're going to run the election for the vice chair, did we have a vice chair last time? I don't see any. Okay, we have a vice chair.
Kind of,
Were you the vice chair?
yeah, but there are only 2 meetings.
Yeah.
And thank you for that point of order. So with that, I'll request the call for the nomination for the vice chair of the Internal Audit Steering Committee.
And do you want to do it?
Do I want? No, I thought Martin could do it again. He did such a good job by the looks of it.
Do like,
Sure. I'm open to either way.
Okay, well, if Martin, if you want it, then can I nominate you?
sure.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I've nominated Martin as your vice chair, as your regal cohort.
Thank you for that nomination. Any oppositions? And so with that, we will just declare Martin to be unanimously appointed as Vice Chair of the Internal Audit Steering Committee.
Tough campaign, Mark.
Yeah. So we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the adoption of the agenda. And may I have a mover for that motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
I can do that, Mr. Chair. Ken Mackay.
Thank you, Councillor McKay. Any amendments, deletions at this point? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor? Motion is carried. Item 4 on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes for the meeting held on April 9, 2021. May I have a mover for the motion?
I wasn't here, so.
Okay, no,
I'll
thank
do
you.
it.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any amendments, deletions to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor? The minutes have been adopted and approved. Item 5 is the audit area consideration for 2022.
That'd be me.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, committee members, to the committee chair. So administration reviewed various documents, the EY Operation Physical Review, the Recovery Task Force, and other programs and services as identified through our review through policy. We've come up with 3 opportunities for the committee to look at for 2022 and 2023. They also have the opportunity for committee members to bring other opportunities forward as well. So those opportunities are review of the city's insurance program. With insurance rates going up in exponential rates, it is time for the city to really do a deep dive into what should we be, I guess, hitting as our benchmark for insurance premiums. And also, are we at that point in time where we should be looking at self-insurance models to realize our investments and our cost savings in that area? The second opportunity is fee structure and sponsorship opportunities. This is a deep dive into our fees and charges to see if we are in line with other like-sized municipalities. And also, are there other opportunities within sponsorships that we should be looking at for our programs and services? Under the local government physical framework that is upcoming, they basically, one of the opportunities that they're looking at within that is municipalities have to maximize their ability to collect fees to maximize their LGFF contributions that they'd be able to get from the government. So what they're saying is that we can't expect the government to provide us funding if we do not maximize our fees that we can get. The third opportunity coming from the EY review is exploring partnership structures for the art and theater. On this one, it's going to be on the EY report, identified about $700,000 per year in cost savings on this opportunity. Administration has been working on this and will be bringing a report forward in September, looking at some of the cost savings that community services has achieved to date. And we'll be having that philosophical discussion with council at that time to be really looking at which direction we should be going, if it should be staying in-house, or if there is type of partnership models that we should be achieving, that we could be exploring further. So that's all 3 of these opportunities are a deep dive into these areas. Within a report as well, we've also provided where we are in some of the previous reviews from the operation and physical review, the communication review, risk management audit, procurement audit, IT service review, social media review, and 911 dispatch. And we were in various points of completion in those, everything from 10% to 20%, and some of them have been completed. So we do have some of our opportunities we're continuing to work on over the next couple of years. So I guess we'll open the floor to a general discussion on the three opportunities, or if there's other opportunities that the committee would like to look at for 2022 into 3. Thank you.
Thank you for that brief update. And as indicated, I think it's discussion time. So we'll open it for any questions. Are there any questions at this point?
I have a question.
Yes.
Kathy, I let them know that you were going to be, you're on your way. So just, you know,
Just so everybody knows, I'm trying to jump in my car to get to the airport. So once I'm in my car driving, I'll be a little bit more focused.
It's all good. Okay, so just one more time, what was the first one again, Carrie, that you mentioned?
Yeah.
I heard, I'm just trying to process them all in my brain. right now.
So we provided 3 opportunities. The first one was the
Right.
city's insurance program. And with insurance rates going up exponentially over the last couple of years, we're paying well over $1 million for insurance premiums right now. And we need to do a deeper dive into what should we, I guess, be looking at achieving for insurance? And should we also be looking at self-insurance?
Okay. It's just, it seems that we're bringing forward recommendations are very different than what we were looking at last time, like with the procurement review and that sort of thing. Like, just seems like a very different direction than an internal audit. What I'm hearing, it's almost like we're just looking for general advice as opposed to looking at procedurally how we're doing things differently, unless I'm missing something.
Well,
So that's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess with the insurance and with the fee structure and stuff, you are correct. It's not really a audit into a service delivery model and stuff, but it is a deep dive into these requirements that we should be looking at moving forward. And I guess it's that. So I'll pass it over to Daria. She'll be able to provide a bit more context on the insurance.
Yeah, just for the insurance, it is in some ways auditing. I mean, we've over the years, we've adjusted our deductibles just to manage the cost. There's some additional kind of pressures for municipality to have 10% in case of major disasters. And we just, we thought it would be a good audit to see, is this still the most effective, cost-effective and efficient way of obtaining insurance for City of St. Albert? Or is this a good opportunity for us to look at self-insurance and if that can realize some cost savings? As for the comment as to why it looks different, like EY review captured a lot of the services. And I think Carrie shared some of those that are already in progress, including internal audit committee. So when we looked at where could we potentially identify some cost savings, insurance and fees came up. So just some additional info.
Okay, I'm going to look to you as well, McDonald, because you've done a bunch of audits in your lifetime. So, or experience, you're not. This isn't new to the game. I can't remember your history, Martin. Please forgive me for that. Because when I'm looking at what we were doing, I think the intention is not just the high level or just the self-review, but really to look at whether or not the procedures are the most efficient and whether or not we can, like, that's what the procurement was the tacticals and the procedures, and also just the qualifications to determine how we could do things more efficiently. And so like, this seems like a light version, I guess. Like I would love to know personally is why we're bleeding $2 million a year off service plays. And that just seems to be skipped over every time we mention it. It just seems to be like, yeah. But we're bleeding more money every single year off of service plays. And there's been no discussion really as to how we can improve our procedures to become more competitive. So I mean, I was looking for something a bit more like that. Personally, if you ask me where I think that needs to go, that's where we're bleeding the most obvious money. And I don't really care the size of the audit that needs to be done on that. I personally would like to know why we're losing so much money every year. When we were not 7 years ago, we were breaking even. And there's a lot of excuses as to why it's happening, but we really need to figure out really what we're doing so we stop doing that. So if you ask me, would I rather have advice of an insurance program or look at how or what we're doing that's causing a $2 million loss a year, I would choose the second one. McDonald, I don't know how you feel about the suggestions or where you're at, or if you have anything else that just, any input.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Hughes. So the first question I actually had, just to follow up on some of the comments you're making, was how have we determined the internal audit plan? Because that is going to influence, how we are prioritizing, the areas. Most organizations use a risk-based assessment or risk-based approach to, approaching their internal audit projects. And it then, makes it, clear to the stakeholders how that process has actually been developed, and ensures for a robust evaluation of the entire internal control environment and system. So because of that, we have to, hear from the administration, where they stand on that. And depending on what the comments are, we then have to understand whether or not, these three areas that are being presented before us, are what the administration considers, necessary for this year. And then we can determine how best to approach that. Because, absent, the background information, it becomes a little difficult to ascertain whether or not we are actually directing the internal audit resources in the appropriate manner. So I'll pause for thoughts or comments at this point.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
You mentioned an audit plan. Does it include a process for prioritization and selection of auditing areas? Does it have?
Ideally.
There's two questions, actually. I've got a few,
go ahead.
But they're all related to a sort of a higher level thing, and it may already exist. So one is there a prioritization and selection process? And if there is, I would expect to see on the I'd say on the agenda, but it's on here somewhere. On the three that were put forward, I would expect to see some kind of a indicator that they each comply with certain criteria for selection. But once they're selected, is there then a standard process and milestones for conducting an audit? Or is it just whatever the team leader thinks that the process should follow? And generally, for the whole organization, are there performance criteria and metrics and rating processes for the general performance of each team, organization, unit, whatever you want to call it? That's my take on what I think an audit system should comprise.
Yeah. So I can say that we are in the process of developing some of those key metrics that in the third part of your conversation about which ones should we be looking at and what our outcomes are going to be. The last few years, the administration has brought forward audit ideas and the committee has picked. And administration goes through the various various programs and services and looks at them. Right now we don't use a evaluation criterion per se. We had the Operation Physical Review that laid out 43 recommendations, and that was conducted by EY. So a couple of these opportunities were identified in that, and but we don't have a matrix per se that lists a number of programs and services and how they rank up against each other. It has been fairly, I'm going to say casual in that sense to this point. And we also have to be looking at what we can physically do from a workload perspective and coming out of the EY review and everything else. So it has been kind of a bit more, I guess, not formalized, but we are working towards that formalization.
And the ultimate question would be, if you had done all this and if other organizations had done it, how did they stack up against each other? Certainly that's what I'm used to in industry, is that we have these curves of how everybody's doing against each other. They're usually secret. There's only the coordinating organization who knows which
Yeah.
organization is on which curve. But it shows how, like St. Albert could see how it stacks up against, say, some place back down east or whatever, or against a whole pile of other people. I'd have thought we need some kind of a vision in that regard.
Yeah, we also have the priority-based budgeting. And so that actually puts things in quartile. Quartile one are things that you have to do, and quartile two are things that are kind of delivered by council policy and bylaw, and quartile three to quartile four are things that it's nice to do. And we also that actually ranks all of our programs and services that we deliver through that process as well. The reason we picked these is that these are areas that we do need to target as a municipality, and more current and stuff like that. But we are also open to other programs and services. As Councillor Hughes brought out, was the service place audit. But basically this is your opportunity to have these conversations with us and come up with a program or service.
But what I would see is if we're just sort of flicking a coin, well, should we do service place or should we do something else? That's just happenstance. Surely we have to have a system. I mean, maybe not this year, but in the long run, there should be a system, I would have thought.
And if I may jump in at this point as well, I actually concur with the comments that are being put forward, because there has to be a structured and disciplined approach to internal audit, and it would start by having a clearly defined internal audit charter that actually acknowledges that acknowledges that it's an independent appraisal function. Which would then have the risk-based approach if the city chooses to use that approach, and then we can determine that. But taking a step back, it appears as though the items that are being presented before us are dealing directly with the EY review. So if we are saying that's the context in which we are going to steward the internal audit function this year, then we have to be clear on what we are doing and then focus our attention on those three areas, if that is the case. So are there comments related to that, just so that we clear that understanding as well?
One of the things that I can confirm through the committee is that each of the audits is done through a third-party consultant, and it is independent. We really do take an arm's length approach from the administration to come up with the best recommendations and outcomes from that audit. But as I said before, we use various, tools at our disposal to come up with where we're sitting with our audit ideas, and that's from the EY report through our priority-based budgeting, through the recovery task force, and through our service and program review policy. But as I said, we are trying to develop key metrics in some of these areas, but we have not come up with a ranking system of how we should be bringing these forward.
Yeah, and by independent, I was referring to how the plan is actually put together as well, as opposed to the administration determining which areas to focus in and then engaging an independent party to review. So it was more of that realization that we have to establish a right mandate and approach for internal audit, so that we are able to leverage that as we go forward.
So what I can say is that what you would have experienced when we did the EY report, and we have probably through the procurement, et cetera, is that through the EY report, for example, the request for proposal was put through the committee, the audit committee. The audit committee picked the company to conduct the audit, and those updates were brought through the committee first prior to going to council. So each step of the way, the committee is highly involved in those outcomes.
Yeah, no, thank you for those comments.
Mr. Chair, it's Ken Mackay here. Just some comments. I guess, so as a new member of the committee, I apologize, and I'm just picking up on some of the conversation. I mean, I agree 100%. This is around how do we select as an internal audit, or is there carryover based on whatever criteria? I think if that what I'm catching, and as I wasn't here before, I'm not aware of what I mean, I just outside of what you just mentioned, Carrie, in relation to the fact that this committee had some input into the selection of Ernst & Young in relation to the operational and fiscal review. So, I mean, if the prioritization or selection of that falls within like the outcomes of the 43 recommendations arising out of the Ernst & Young, was there actions from that report that then automatically continue over into this year from an identification or kind of going further down? Or is it just the idea that we'll just continue with Ernst & Young as part of an external review, but what, is there something from this committee internal? And from what I'm hearing, there isn't an internal process that, as Martin has identified, prioritizes or identifies other projects that could go on in conjunction with priority-based budgeting and also with Ernst & Young recommendations and the other existing audits that have third-party consultants. Is there something internally that I think we're missing a process, actually. I think we're missing a process where we actually look at how do we identify that and then move forward based on that. So I mean, if Service Place was identified as something, it would kind of it would rise to the top quite quickly in comparisons with something else. Like, let's say, I mean, for me, I was saying, is there an operational issue that potentially that we could have an impact on? Like, should we review the way we do our peace officers, our municipal enforcement? I mean, is there some way, like, how do we, and then is there a weighting system to compare the two differently so we can look at it internally? And I realize, you know, you've said a couple of times our administration is really inundated with work related to Ernst & Young and the other existing third party. So I'm not even, I mean, capacity would based into that weighing scale. So Mr. Chair, I mean, just from a new person for this committee, but with some internal information, I guess I think we're still missing a process, and maybe that's something that we have to take a step back to identify a process and then we would take input from administration, but we would also take input from the audit committee. But we have to put it into some matrix where we can actually score it. We can put some weights on it, and that we can actually feel confident coming out of the committee that this is the one that we should focus on moving forward. And maybe that includes work carries over from last term. So I think we're missing a process.
Yeah, no, we are.
Just from an outside, just from a new member of the committee. I mean, I know we have the bylaw. I know we have maybe. So I'm not saying we have to totally reinvent the wheel, in my opinion, but when I'm being involved in internal audits before, that's where I've said it before. I mean, there is some sort of a criteria scoring, something that identifies some of those areas. And from then we can develop an internal auditing plan. I mean, Mr. McDonald, you know this way better than I do. So, I mean, but I think we're kind of missing that. We're kind of like Martin says, we're kind of like put some things up on a dartboard and throw darts at it. So
we are missing that process. The last few audits in terms of the procurement and risk audit stuff were brought forward by administration.
Yeah.
So we are missing though that evaluation process of what rises to the top or what should be considered as the tops and stuff. We're bringing forward ones that administration has identified.
Yeah.
And there are others as well, but in terms, we have to be looking at administration's capacity and ability to be able to affect change. But, you know, for example, the procurement audit was 2019 and we're probably 20% into it. And we'll probably be about 20, 25, 26 before we fully realize the procurement audit.
Right. So I mean, and I guess, sorry, Chair, I'm just carrying on if you don't mind. I guess
Go ahead.
that just speaks to maybe capacity is probably part of our problem from an internal auditing process. I mean, so yes, we went out and got third parties to do quite a few, but that still involves internal people as well. And probably only a few internal people, unfortunately. So I guess what I'm looking, I'm looking for a process that would help me identify whether or not we do something new for this year. If I know we put more money in the budget this year to look at doing that. So I mean, is there like, have we jumped ahead, way far ahead? Have we put the old proverbial cart in front of the horse? Excuse my language, or
Possibly, but I would say is that if the committee wants to go down that path and directing administration to come back with a process, then that's your right. Under the committee bylaw, you guys set those parameters.
Mhm.
You guys say, you know what, we're not comfortable moving forward with an idea until we come up with an evaluation type of matrix, then direct us to do that.
okay, all right. I don't know. Thank you,
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Those
Yeah,
are my
and very useful comments, and clearly the acknowledgement that a process needs to be established, and the reality is, what does the process look like? Because the city doesn't have an internal audit function, and the city administration decides, the items to be put forward, obviously in consultation with the council, and the internal audit steering committee just gets involved in formalizing, the activities that have already been predetermined. So part of the process should be actually assessing, whether or not the city needs to have an established internal audit function. Obviously, the costs are a constraint here. However, we should be, understanding that in order to put an effective internal audit function in place, there has to be a cost associated with it. And it's a discussion that, the administration needs to have and possibly bring forward to council to make sure that we have, the right approach to evaluating and appraising the overall internal control process and environment. I draw attention to, similar cities, although, I mean, it's not fair to, compare significantly large cities with small ones like St. Albert. However, the city of Edmonton has a fully fledged internal audit function, and it could be used as a benchmark to assess, what right size fit function could be put in place for the city of St. Albert, and ensure that the items that we're discussing are properly captured as well, if the administration is amenable to that.
So within, go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
So are you suggesting that we actually have an internal audit department? Because we have approval for 300,000 or something like that, 300, 320, something like that, for internal audit. I did not get in the budget an approval for a new department. So we're going to have to work within the constraints that we have, which is that we have money for external consultants to do internal audits, but we are not going to be able to have an internal audit department like Edmonton. That just wasn't approved, and I don't think I could get it approved.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Sorry, Councillor, that's understandable. However, there are still different ways to deliver, the service. It may not necessarily be establishing an in-house department. It could be an outsourced arrangement like what we're having. And in that scoping of the outsourced work, we should be, requesting that they also help us with establishing a risk-based plan within the budget constraints that are in place, and make sure that we're delivering, the service in accordance with the required, benchmarks and standards that are widely used.
Yeah. So that is within your committee's bylaw. And so that you guys can set those up. I don't think that we require at our size an internal audit committee. If we have one audit every year or two and it's kind of done through a third-party external consultant, that's probably all we can probably manage, because with the workload that comes out of some of the audits as well. But this is within your bylaw is to establish those criteria. So of how you want to move forward.
Mr. Chair, just another comment. It's Ken Mackay here again, sir. I think honestly, and Councillor Hughes, I think we need, in my opinion, being just sitting here and being involved in internal audits in my other line of work, I think that's the biggest part we're missing. We're missing actually an evidence-based approaches to identifying what we should be looking at. And if we need to engage with some of our dollars, a process, some sort of a third party or something that can build that for us, or actually at least build a framework that we can then carry forward with internal administration. That, because you're right, we're not going to be able to create a department and do that. I mean, the fact that we even got this far with an internal audit committee is kudos to yourself. But I think what we need to do is identify actually now a process rather than what we've already talked about, where we've had, okay, administration brings a couple, you bring one, maybe our volunteers bring forward one, but I think there actually needs to be some sort of a process. So, and I don't think there's a capacity within administration to do that other than maybe engaging with a third party with some background skill sets around building that, and then we can start to feed the machine and then get some value out of our processes here. That's where I'm looking at doing it right now. So I otherwise we just say let's do, and sorry for using your example again, Councillor Hughes, but let's do service place, but then we still got to engage potentially a third party to scope that out. Like, what are we trying to engage? Like, is there, like, what do we do? Because I mean, those are, we had the 2004, 2008 review that was quite extensive, and that involved a whole bunch of people, and that was even more than an audit. So, and I don't think that's where you want to go with it, but I think that we need to identify a process, and then we can move forward, and then we have the dollars then to actually conduct it.
So how do we go to get to the process stage? I don't disagree with you, Ken. I think that it's fine if we have it, because last time, I mean, you guys, I've been here since the beginning, right? And last time it was, well, first of all, it was like trying to drag a boulder up a hill to get this thing going. There was a suggestion from Kevin that this was an area that he thought was that could use a review to strengthen it. Right. So we accepted that as face value and said, okay, like if you think that this is an area that could use an investigation to try to help it, and that's kind of how we made that decision process. Yeah. So we didn't have a matrix that time, but we just simply took administration's recommendation and said, okay, we're comfortable moving forward with that, with the expectation that there was going to be another internal audit, which then was not, or then we moved into the E&Y review instead. So so there wasn't a process developed, and there certainly could be. It would certainly be helpful in the event that this was to be more of a longer term, like not only this term, but also going to the future, doing something in that way. I don't think that just copying what E&Y has to say is going to be of value in just saying that we're doing that. I also think that we have a real potential here to completely wash out the value of an internal auditor, because it's more comfortable than actually doing a deep dive and saying, how can we do things differently? So I just don't know how we're supposed to get to the next stage. Once we agreed on the recommendation from administration last time, went to council for approval, and then there was an RFP put forward, and then there was the evaluation of the submissions, and then there was recommendation for the final candidate. So but the RFP also has to have constraints around it so that the people who are bidding on it know what we're bidding on. So if we're going to do it where we have an external entity giving us recommendations in the process, again, we're going to have some kind of an RFP done. Administration did it last time, and then we came back and provided any feedback to do that. Because, and then that being said, we're probably delaying the process by, based on the speed of this happened in the past, a good year before we even do something, which at this point, just resigning myself. This is probably how it's going to happen. I feel like there's just no will to actually do internal audit function. That is how I feel, especially when I see what's coming forward as recommendations, which is difficult because you can't identify solutions to identify problems or weak points.
We have to identify problems, and that's my kind of intent of my comments. And sorry for jumping in, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I mean, McDonald, you know how to run an audit. I mean, and you know what an audit plan involves, and you know how building the matrix, and then that's identifying the problems, and then we go forward. But I mean, to make this sustainable, to make this long-term, I think we need to develop the process first. And I think that's what's missing, because we've kind of, like you said, you've identified, Councillor Hughes, that we did this based on kind of an ad hoc basis last year because we had the operational fiscal review moving forward. But to ingrain this into the organization, I think we need to identify, and your point around, yes, maybe this year we spend a lot of time just setting up a process. But I mean, at least we have a process that will then start to identify internal audit areas. So, I mean, if we can even get that going, we build a program that we can actually make it sustainable. So, I mean, and I don't think that necessarily means that we spend a lot of money at it. I just think I think we have the ability right now to look at how do we build that program. And I think that should be one of our first actionable items so that we can make this sustainable. And how that's done, whether that's with internal resources or whether we use some of that, like as administration has identified, that we actually say we need to engage a third party to build that. And then at least we have a process that we can then go forward on. That's my opinion. Sorry. Anyways, Mr. Chair, I mean, I don't know that. I think this is a good discussion, but I want to have something to come out of it anyways.
Yeah, and certainly your comments, are well, put forward. And from what I'm hearing, it appears as though we may need to separately commission, that process to, or work with administration to, help us commission that. And whilst at the same time, recognize that, we have, the operational review items, that we have to consider. Do we have, enough support, within the internal audit steering committee to, approve, or recommend for approval, at least one or two of the items, to continue to progress so that at least the administration works on something whilst, at the same time, we expect them to, come back to us with the process. Or do we want to hold on to these three whilst we look at the process?
I mean, you've asked a question, Chair. It's just chemical again. I think, you're right. We could kind of build a hybrid, and so it was a good question. My feeling on the three presented they're going to happen anyways. I mean, they need to happen. Review of the insurance program probably needs to happen, or potentially, or the fee structure. But I don't think that they're actually audits. I think that there's something, their work. You've got from the ongoing with the external consultants with what's happened in the world over the last 2 years. You've got many of them that are only 20% complete, 10%. So I think that could carry forward, and that would suffice while we're building it. So, I mean, that's just where I'm going right now. I don't think we would. I need an evidence-based process first. And I think we need to spend some time to build that. And then I would recommend that we let administration carry forward with the work that they've got existing right now, but let's get a process going so that we can actually then be confident that this committee can actually then identify an internal audit and move forward with it. And if it'll take what time it needs to take, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment because the items you gave as examples are advisory type services and internal audit function. Some mature internal audit functions have the ability to, carry out that as well. So what I'm hearing is the administration has to continue with, at least these two projects, the review of the insurance program and the fee structure and sponsorship without internal audit input, and separately help us define the process for internal audit.
Jump in, Martin.
I'm just jumping in. Could I jump in, Mr. Chair? It seems we have two halves of the situation here. One is the longer term audit system, and we could look at variations within that theme, such as, for instance, and just don't faint when I say this, but let's consider a self-assessment program. This is not unusual, but it'd be based on some proper, very clear guidelines, such as has been done elsewhere. And the trap that a lot of people fall into when they do a self-assessment is they rate themselves too good. So if you link this with their performance, they've got nowhere left to go. So usually it takes two goes round for them to realize that the first time, hey, we've put ourselves into a bad spot. Then you get the real truth as to what does, how they're performing. So I just mentioned that within the longer term framework. For these three, actually four potential audit areas we've got on the table, the fourth being the service place, how about asking a very simple question? What would be the consequence, particularly in dollar terms, of not conducting this review or audit? Then, if you quantify that, it be time or dollars or whatever, you could get a priority out of it. So what if you don't do the health thing? Well, it might be a huge cost implication.
Well, we do have to do the insurance. There is impacts that are happening there. The fee structure could wait, in terms of moving that forward. We are moving the audit partnership model forward ourselves. There'll be a philosophical discussion with council in September, October. And the impacts of the service place audit, those are intrusive, and not to say that you shouldn't do them, but they're very intrusive. And is it the best time to do that after coming out of COVID? Is it the best time to be doing that right now? Not to say that it shouldn't be done, but is this the best time to do it? And that's a question that, if we're directed to do it, we'll do it. But I think that's from an administrative perspective right now. But if council, but again, if the committee wants to move forward with this, and we do need to, we would look at a third-party resource to create that model or matrix of evaluating which programs and services need to be looked at. I think that would provide us the best outcome. As you said, I'd rather have that done through third party, because then it takes away administrative influence.
Any further thoughts, Councillor Hughes?
I'm just not sure where to go now. Like, I'm comfortable if you guys want to do a process, a framework. I think that, I think I agree with you, Ken. Like, if we do get the framework in place, then at least we do have something where the next question is easier to answer. Because ideally, you'll do more than one audit, unless you did service place, then all the money's being used up on that. But if you end up doing more than one audit, or you do it in the future, having that process, I think, will help us, because we just don't know right now. So I would like to see what at City of Edmonton's process is, because they have a process where departments will come and say, they're initiating it, like, we'd like to have a review. And there's other times where the City of Edmonton makes, like, the audit department makes a decision to do it on their own. And I'm not sure how they form those decisions. I'd love to know how they are making the decision to move forward on which elements, so that they get the most value for what they're doing. So, I mean, I think that maybe what we need to do is get a report back on how that is happening, and then from there make a decision if we need to do an external or just simply follow their their processes. And then if we choose to follow their processes or do it externally, then from there, we can then come forward and make a decision. So I'm guessing that even if we did that, we're still not going to actually make a decision about anything before the late fall earliest. And then it still has to go to RFP, et cetera, et cetera. So we're probably looking at 9 months plus before we actually begin another audit. So as far as city resources, I mean, we're not talking about today, we're talking about much later in the future before anything even begins. But I think that that's what we probably need to do, is at least get some kind of a model. And then, so the two things I think we're looking at, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, McDonald, because I could be completely off my rocker on this, right? You've done these more than me, is we need to look at what the city of Edmonton has done, and also look at a cost estimate on what would be if we had it externally produced for us to determine if the value of having it and the timelines and that kind of thing. So if we were to come back and get those two pieces of information, at least then we could decide how we're going to move forward on the decision-making process.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure about the 9 months timeline, Councillor Hughes, because just making an assessment should not require that much time. But again, recognizing that we are getting into summer, and there could be that inability to get the right people to assist.
I just know how this process works, so I'm just looking at it realistically.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair and Councillor Hughes, I was just talking to Carrie. I asked how long it would just take, because again, you got different scale. And pardon me again, is there any reason why this committee can't meet more often in relation to identifying particularly work? If based on what you said, Sheena, in relation to kind of a two-step approach where we would actually identify, just do a scan, and it can be broader than Edmonton's. Edmonton's is quite complicated. Well, not complicated. It's very established. And I'm familiar with it as well because I worked in it. But there's other ones maybe going on in more of around our mid-size community. I'm not aware of any. You might know, but I think a scan should only take 3 months. And then from there we can move forward. So you're right, Chair, I think we're moving into summer, but if we came out of this in September with something back and by September, I think then we can then move on to the next step and then move on to the process. So yeah, maybe that does take 9 months, but it totally, Councillor Hughes, but at the same time, I think if we can start to build a process so that we can even get a scan of what's out there, and then if we need to go to a third party, or if we can even do it internally, I don't know. So I don't want to presuppose any outcome yet. So I'm willing to put that forward as a motion, Mr. Chair, in relation to directing administration to come back with a report identifying internal auditing processes by September, or whatever, if you want to go by September. Does that work for you, Sheena? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's realistic.
I also see a comment from Mayor Heron there. She's going to be asking some insight, in her travels. So hopefully we'll be able to get some input. And I do concur with what Councillor McKay has mentioned, that we put forward a motion and ensure that we have a timeline for that as well.
May I add a caveat to that? For the several reviews that are underway that are only 10%, 20% or whatever, what's the expectation of how they'll come back, or when they'll come back? At the format that they'll come back, will they come back every which way depending on who the author was? Or will there be some guidelines, especially as they're only partly processed right now, some guidelines to say, well, there's these milestones and there's these titles that need to be addressed, some kind of standardization, rationalization.
So you're talking about like where we're at 10%, 20%, where we are the thing. And a lot of that comes down to budget and resources to take those further.
Oh, well, that wasn't my point though. My point was, since they haven't gone very far, well, first of all, is there some instruction that they will come back in a certain way? Not the when. Will they come back with this in a certain format? So they're comparable, easy to read. Because my experience of reading all these types of reports is it's really a head scratcher. I'm sure you have the same problems when you get reports from all sorts of consultants. They're all so different.
Yeah, and I guess some of them, sorry, Mr. Chair, for jumping in response to Martin's. I guess some of those are internal processes. I'm not familiar. Were they coming back to this committee? No, and so a lot of them are internal processes, and they would come back. They would come back to council, maybe not to this committee.
Yeah, there's annual updates to council. They have been completed. The audits or reviews have been done. And so now it's in administration to execute the outcomes.
So I suppose the question I didn't ask at the beginning is what's our function? To distinguish between a review, any old review, and audit. Should there be some definition?
But that's what I'm trying to, so we need process. I'm trying to identify, because I see your point. And that's my question too. What's your function? So we have a bylaw, but we don't have a process in my view. And so I'm trying to say, let's see what's out there. Let's develop that process so that you can feel like you're not wasting your time sitting here.
But the process is only a means of attaining that function. What is the function of the committee?
Well, that's what we need to get out of this. And because basically that's where we've been floundering the last 3 or 4 years, is that some of the things we've done have been audits and some of them have just been reviews.
Yeah, and I want to have, I think I'm with Councillor Hughes here. I actually want to have a vigorous internal audit program that identifies potential issues, and then that we can identify through a process and then assign, and whether it's third party or whether it's internal, whatever we choose, that there's an actual identification, and then the process would then have something back again to us. I mean, sorry, McDonald, you know that you do this every day of your life, and I apologize. So,
and I think you are right on point. Certainly when it comes to the process, and in my summarization, it's just making sure that we're establishing an effective internal audit function, because then that's going to determine how the internal audit steering committee bylaws actually support that function and ensure that we're providing the independent appraisal that's required for the administration and council and every other stakeholder for the city.
So, Mr. Chair, do you need a motion going forward in relation to direct administration to do that?
That's exactly why we need to keep this conversation. And I think we do have a good summary of the motion outlined here. So I will request a mover.
Is that sufficient, Sheena? Do you want to see something else in there that administration be directed to bring forward? Identifying, or go ahead, sorry.
Would include internal scan of municipalities.
Yeah, internal scan.
Internal processes, including internal scan. So identify internal process, including internal scan of municipalities.
Internal scan?
Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what she said, but I'm just wondering. Yeah.
And then what other ones?
Internal scan of municipalities, of comparable municipalities, or
it doesn't have to be internal scan. It could just be scan. A scan of
so including scan of municipalities
that use internal auditing.
That use internal auditing.
Yeah.
You can get rid of internal scan. Like you can just do scan. Yeah, get rid of that.
And then after municipalities, put
one above two.
Then put that utilize
auditing functions.
That utilize auditing functions, or utilize
internal auditing function. An internal auditing function.
So internal.
Thanks. Sorry, Renee. How does that?
One more internal up above. Or is that okay? Okay, maybe fine. Sorry, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's okay, Terry.
Yeah.
Does that look okay to you, Chair, or Sheena?
I would have preferred to see that, have established internal audit functions, just so that we have that distinction, not just utilization, but, ensuring that, there's an established internal audit function.
Okay,
But it's-
So instead of utilize, established,
that have established internal audit functions.
that have established.
That have established, yeah.
Yeah, that have, yeah.
And the other thing I'm just gonna throw out there, and I'm looking for you guys for feedback, is whether or not we want to have any type of like, just like an analysis, like if we're gonna do an external person or organization to create hours, like what are we looking at for timelines and general costs? Like, I'm not looking for detail, but is it gonna be 10,000 or 5,000 or 20,000, just so that we know, and what we would expect for a typical timeline if we were to have it. That's what so we want to know what's been the comparison, and then what would it cost to have somebody make it up for us, I guess, is the two things.
That's what we're bringing back.
Yeah, I think that's the intent that I took forward would be that the scan would identify not only those municipalities that have established internal auditing, but are they done internally, or are they done through a third party? What are the costs? So unless you.
So is that
unless you
being
would-
implied? I wasn't sure if it was being implied, I guess, is
I'm
the,
just, well, I was just looking at the administration here and they say it's implied, but
Yeah, we'd be able to provide estimates.
yeah, it'd be estimates and the freedom. Unless you wanted to specifically say that the administration be directed to bring forward a report identifying internal auditing processes
We need RFI to be more specific.
And related costs.
and related costs and impact and cost impacts or related costs.
Sure.
I don't want to get too wordy on it. I think if the intent is there.
I just
think
don't want to
the-
lose it. I
Yeah,
just don't want to get there and then be like, oh, and we still need more information to decide how we're going to move forward, and then have even more of a delay, right?
yeah,
That's all.
Yeah.
So, and related costs can come in after internal audit processes then. Internal
okay,
auditing
and
processes
related, yeah, you can put in and
and
related
related
costs,
costs, yeah.
and related costs.
Yeah.
Yes. Administration be directed to bring forward a report identifying internal and related costs. Yeah, okay, I mean, obvious, yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay. I can put that forward, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we do have Councillor McKay as the mover of the motion. Any opposed to the motion?
Opposed, but it seems a bit awkward.
Yeah.
There's something funny in the middle there.
Yeah, it does,
Yeah.
sorry, Martin has just identified something, I'm including a scan, so it's almost like it's a double.
Yeah.
Sort of like bring forward identifying internal auditing processes and that would include, and related costs.
Then start sending out emails.
Yeah,
Okay, we can have it.
related costs.
Bless you.
It still reads a little awkward, but administration be directed to bring forward a report identifying internal auditing process related costs. That includes a scan?
How
Well,
about from a scan?
from a scan, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a scam. Oh, I said from a scam. Sorry, I didn't mean a scam.
They're all good.
Oh, yeah, a little Freudian there.
Just continue.
Administration, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think it is okay. So, motion is amended, any opposed? And all in favor?
Everybody's good.
Okay, the motion is carried. Yeah. Thank you for that. And then moving on to item 6, which is the next meeting date. We didn't put timelines to the motion there. So what does that mean?
September, I think what we've asked, sorry for jumping in, Mr. Chair, but I think we've asked or directed administration to come back by September. So I mean, I guess that's when we have to identify our meeting. So do you want to pick a specific meeting time frame date?
Yes. Yeah, we can get that with the help of the administration,
Yeah.
when they figure out the availability for the members.
Yeah.
Yes. So it will be September sometime, subject to confirmation.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And then we move forward to item 7. I just wanted to check with all the members if there are any other items that they wish to bring forward to the meeting, including the administration as well. If not, then I'll call for the motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay,
I think you can just call it McDonald. You don't have to do an motion.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
say-
just declare it. You got all
Just
this
declare it,
power.
we'll be good.
You got all this power.
excellent. I didn't want to make sure, I wanted to make sure we include everybody, but now that I've been given that power, yes, we do adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Look forward to meeting everyone in September.
Thanks, thanks. I just want to make sure we have a process. That's.
All right.
Mr. David, this is
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sheena.